Hey, there's a group of people who have been going through the Camp Checkmate webinars and reporting back to me with really interesting results that I hadn't thought about yet, and I'd like to talk about that for a couple minutes right now. And the group is people who are, for whatever reason, a little bit insecure about what they're doing, wondering if they're qualified enough or good enough or experienced enough, or wondering why someone should do business with them when there's other people out there who have more experience or a bigger name or have written a book, and they're wondering, well, who am I? And every time they maybe get a client, a prospect, a potential client, they're always thinking, well, I can't charge that much, or I don't know exactly how I'm going to do this, and they're just sort of riddled with various inner voices that are full of self-doubt. And this can be a really debilitating thing. And there's a whole group of people who tend to be pretty self-aware, like they're conscious of what goes on inside them, and those are the people who tend to have the most voices in their head saying, who are you to be doing this and to be charging money for it? And when you have that voice in your head, and I can tell you from experience, it's pretty hard to be strong in your marketing. And when you try to be strong in your marketing and you haven't dealt with those voices, it often comes across as too much, as overcompensation, as fake, as like the spiritual equivalent of a screaming 64-point font with red exclamation points and yellow highlighter all over the page. It's not in integrity, and people can sense that and they run away from it. So the question is, what do you do about that? And one answer is, of course, years and years of therapy and self-development. But you know what, in order to afford that, you need to be making money. And besides, we want to deal with it right now. And so this is what I discovered, that when people go through the Camp Checkmate exercises, these issues, they don't go away, but they become non-issues. And they just recede into unimportance. And to explain why, I'm going to tell you a quick story. This happened about 15 years ago. When my daughter wasn't yet 2 years old. We lived in a house with a screened-in back porch, and in the backyard was an in-ground swimming pool. And I was sitting on the porch, and my daughter was out by the pool. And she's a smart kid. She wasn't just going to go tumbling headlong in the pool. I didn't feel like I needed to stand right next to her. So you know where this story's going. But there was a beautifully bright, blown-up beach ball in the pool, and it had floated over to the edge of the shallow end, and she reached out for it, and of course as she touched it, it pushed away from her in the water and she fell in. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need to tell you about me and swimming. I have always hated swimming, and I've never been good at it. As a little kid, I used to wear nose plugs and ear plugs, and I couldn't go underwater, and if I tried to swim I had to hold my nose or do a dumbass doggy paddle with my head up in the air. And as a result, when I got to summer camp and we had to take swimming classes, I was an advanced beginner for about 7 years in a row. I was like older than the counselors, and I was still an advanced beginner, grabbing that paddle board and kicking my feet and trying to put my head in the water and turn to the side. And as a result, I could never learn to dive, and I've always hated swimming. And I always felt correctly that I was no good at it. So let's come back to that moment when I'm sitting on the porch and I hear the splash and I see my daughter disappearing into the pool. So you might think at that moment that all my thoughts about my swimming inadequacies would come back to me. You might think that I would be wondering, could I do it? Should I call someone? Who am I to run in there and save her? Maybe I should call a friend down the street who's a lifeguard. Of course, none of that happened. I jumped out of my chair, opened the door, took 5 steps, jumped into the pool, and pulled her out within a couple of seconds. There was no thinking involved. There was no recrimination involved. There was no self-doubt. There was none of that. There was no thinking at all. It was simply, I did what had to be done. And of course, that's expected, and you would do the same thing. But coming back to Camp Checkmate, what I've discovered is when we deeply empathize with our prospects, with what they're going through, with the deep fears, needs, desires, longings that underlie whatever search they're doing, the same thing happens. We lose ourselves. We lose our worries, our fears, our self-doubts, and we simply want to jump in and help. it didn't matter that I wasn't the best swimmer in the world or even the best swimmer in the house. My wife's a far better swimmer than I am. But she wasn't there and I was. And that's what happens in business. Someone finds you and you're there. And when you are all caught up in your own stuff, then you can't connect with their need. But once you understand their deep need, and even if it's couched in terms of that you don't really approve of, if you feel like they're being greedy or they're driven by fear or hate or envy or any of these negative emotions that often drive us to action, Camp Checkmate shows you how to access the positive needs, the common needs and desires and feelings that we all share. And once you're in touch with that, marketing becomes simple. It becomes as simple as running 4 steps and jumping in to save someone. And I've heard time and again, people who've taken the live classes and people who've participated in these webinars, that all of a sudden marketing became simple. They got out of their own heads and were able to serve people who really needed their help. So I'm offering this in case that's you. And one of the reasons it might be is that for many years that was me. And so like attracts like. So I find that a lot of people who watch these videos and read my emails and follow my work can understand what I'm talking about. So if that's you, and you would like to get out of that conversation in your head that can be so stifling, so debilitating, and so opposed to progress and growth in your business, I would invite you to consider the virtual Camp Checkmate that's starting quite soon as a way to get out of that. And this isn't about, doubling your sales or checkmating your competition or any of the other stuff that Checkmate does. This is a much deeper and more subtle benefit. But I've seen it so many times, and I've seen the power of this subtle benefit to make those other top-line changes that I wanted to share it with you today. So thanks a lot, and have a great day.